You're trapped, right now, in this moment, not by bars or walls, but by a lie so deep you've stopped questioning it. The lie that you should be happy, always. That if you're not smiling, not grateful, not positive, something is wrong with you. Not the world. You. Remember when you were small, before they told you to wipe away your tears? Before they said turn that frown upside down like your pain was an inconvenience to them? Before happiness became your job? I watched a man at a funeral once. His mother had died, and as he stood receiving guests, he kept apologizing. Apologizing. For crying. Sorry, he whispered, wiping his tears, straightening his face. I should be celebrating her life. Even in grief, he felt he was failing at happiness. This isn't natural. This isn't human. This is the greatest deception of our age. Look around you. The $10 billion self-help industry. The endless stream of positive vibes-only content. The meditation apps promising bliss in 10 minutes a day. The influencers with perfect morning routines and serene smiles. They're not selling growth or wisdom. They're selling escape. From what? From yourself. From the parts they've convinced you are wrong. Broken. Not good enough. We no longer experience emotions. We judge them. Sadness? Fix it. Anxiety? Control it. Doubt? Eliminate it. We treat our inner worlds like a disease that needs curing instead of a voice that needs hearing. And when the fix doesn't work, when the positive affirmations and gratitude journals and wellness retreats leave you feeling just as empty, you don't question the system. You blame yourself. Not spiritual enough, not disciplined enough, not evolved enough. This isn't freedom. It's a cage painted to look like paradise. But what if I told you that the way out isn't up into some permanent state of bliss? What if the way out is through the very darkness you've been running from? What if your unhappiness isn't the problem, but the beginning of your solution? You can feel it, that quiet distance between the person you show and the person you are. The exhaustion that comes not from doing too much, but from being too little of yourself. You smile when you're breaking. You post vacation photos while your chest tightens with dread. You say, I'm fine. So automatically you don't remember the last time you checked if it was true. Think about it. When was the last time you answered honestly when someone asked, how are you? When was the last time you let yourself feel something difficult without immediately trying to fix it, transform it, reframe it into something positive? Sarah, a woman I know, built her entire identity around being the positive one, the strong one, the one who never broke. For 20 years she maintained this image, through divorce, through cancer, through the death of her father. Good vibes only, she'd say, posting sunrise photos from her hospital room. Then one night, alone in her kitchen, she dropped a mug, a simple blue mug that shattered on the tile. And something in her shattered, too. She sank to the floor and began to sob, not just for the mug, but for all the tears she'd never allowed herself to cry. All the grief she'd painted over with positivity, all the anger she'd suffocated with gratitude. I felt like I was meeting myself for the first time in decades, she told me later. This whole person I'd been pushing down, pretending wasn't there. This is the cost of our happiness obsession. Not just exhaustion from the constant performance, but a profound disconnection from our authentic selves. We've become strangers to our own hearts, and it's killing us quietly. Look at the statistics. Depression rates climbing even as mindfulness apps multiply. Anxiety disorders spreading like wildfire through the most privileged populations in history. The emptiness epidemic, the loneliness crisis, the rising tide of addictions to anything that will numb the pain of being conscious in a world that tells you consciousness should feel good all the time. We've traded depth for distraction, meaning for momentary pleasure, truth for comfort. But here's what no one tells you. This disconnect isn't just uncomfortable, it's unbearable. The human soul cannot survive being divided against itself forever. Sooner or later, something breaks. And when it does, you'll face the most terrifying question. If I'm not the happy person I pretended to be, who am I? It comes without warning. A random Tuesday, a normal moment. Standing in a grocery store aisle staring at 30 different brands of cereal, and suddenly nothing makes sense. Your carefully constructed life begins to unravel, not with a dramatic crash, but with a quiet rip in the fabric of your certainty. Why am I doing this? What's the point? Who am I beneath all these habits and routines I've collected to make myself acceptable? Mark, a successful executive, described it to me this way. I was sitting in a meeting I'd been working toward for months. I'd just closed the biggest deal of my career. Everyone was congratulating me, and all I could think was, is this it? Is this what I've been killing myself for? I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. It was like watching someone else's life through a dirty window. This is the collapse. The moment when the gap between who you pretend to be and who you actually are becomes too wide to cross. When your soul refuses to be silenced any longer. It might look like a panic attack in your perfect kitchen, a breakdown in your corner office, a sudden inability to get out of bed despite your vision board on the wall. The body keeps the score, and eventually it demands to be heard. Our culture calls this a nervous breakdown, a midlife crisis, a failure of positive thinking. But the ancient mystics knew better. They called it the dark night of the soul, not a collapse, but an initiation, not a breakdown, but a breakthrough waiting to happen. Because when your constructed self falls apart, something else has room to emerge, something real, something that was there all along beneath the performance. Kierkegaard understood this. He wrote that anxiety is not an illness to be cured, but the dizziness of freedom. That moment of terror when you realize the script you've been following was never yours to begin with. When you see that happiness was never supposed to be a permanent state, but a visitor, coming and going like all emotions, teaching you something different each time. The collapse feels like dying because it is a kind of death. The death of who you thought you were. The death of the illusion that if you just did everything right, you would never have to feel pain. But here's the truth, they don't tell you in self-help books. This collapse is not the end of your story, it's the true beginning. The question is, will you have the courage to walk through the ruins of who you thought you were and discover who you might become? There's a part of you that you've been hiding. From others, yes, but more dangerously, from yourself. Your sadness, your rage, your fear, your doubt. All the emotions that didn't fit the highlight reel. You buried them deep, under positivity, under busyness, under no bad vibes. But they didn't disappear. They grew in the dark. Jung called this the shadow, not because it's evil, but because it's hidden. The collection of all you've deemed unacceptable, unfixable, unworthy of love. The parts you disown to belong, to succeed, to appear together. But here's what Jung understood that our happiness cult forgot. What you resist persists. What you deny controls you. The shadow doesn't vanish when ignored. It sabotages. It erupts. It turns your life into a battlefield between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. I think of James, a spiritual teacher, who preached compassion and love while secretly harboring a storm of unacknowledged rage. I was so disconnected from my anger that I didn't recognize it, he said. It came out in judgment, in passive aggression, in controlling behavior. I hurt people while believing I was above such negative emotions. His awakening came not through more meditation or positive thinking, but through allowing himself to feel the very rage he'd condemned. I had to scream. I had to pound pillows. I had to admit I wasn't as evolved as I pretended to be. And paradoxically, that admission was the most spiritually honest moment of my life. This is the shadow work our happiness-obsessed culture fears. Not endless self-improvement, but radical self-acceptance. Not transcending our humanity, but fully inhabiting it. Mess, pain, confusion and all. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's the exiled part of your soul waiting to be reclaimed. Every emotion you've labeled bad, every thought you've deemed unspiritual, every instinct you've called wrong. These aren't obstacles to your awakening. They are the awakening. Because true spiritual maturity isn't rising above your humanity. It's embracing it completely. It's having the courage to say, this too is me. The jealousy, the pettiness, the days I can't find gratitude, the moments I want to scream at motivational posters, all of it. Accepted, not as failure, but as proof I'm fully alive. This acceptance feels like drowning at first. Like if you allow these darker emotions in, they'll consume you. But that's another lie. What consumes you is fighting them. What exhausts you is the war against yourself. When you finally surrender, when you say yes to even the ugliest parts of your experience, something miraculous happens. You discover these emotions aren't infinite. They rise, they teach, they transform, they release. If you'll only give them the dignity of being witnessed. And in that witnessing, you find a peace deeper than happiness. A wholeness that doesn't depend on feeling good, but on feeling true. The shadow isn't the darkness you need to escape. It's the buried light waiting to be reclaimed. Are you brave enough to look at what you've been hiding? Stop fighting, right now. Just for a moment, stop trying to fix yourself. Stop forcing positivity. Stop pretending you're fine when you're not. Just stop. Feel the relief in that surrender. That's not giving up. That's the first honest breath you've taken in years. We've been taught that surrender is weakness, that acceptance means defeat, that if we stop constantly improving, optimizing, and transforming ourselves, we'll somehow dissolve into chaos or mediocrity. But the ancient wisdom traditions, from Buddhism to Taoism to Christian mysticism, all point to a paradoxical truth. True change begins with radical acceptance of what is, not what should be, not what could be, what is. I think of Elena, a perfectionist who spent decades at war with her body, her emotions, her very being. I was always fixing, always improving, she said. Even my meditation practice became another way to reject myself, to try to rise above my flawed humanity. Her breakthrough came not through another self-help book or wellness program, but through an act of surrender. During a particularly dark period, she stopped trying to feel better. She stopped forcing gratitude. She stopped pretending. I just said to myself, this is where I am right now. I'm depressed. I'm lost. And that's okay. It was the first kind thing I'd said to myself in years. That simple acceptance, that permission to be exactly as she was, didn't trap her in negativity as she'd feared. It released her. For the first time, she wasn't fighting reality. She was meeting it. And in that meeting, she found something more valuable than happiness. She found peace. This is the great paradox. We only truly change when we stop trying to change ourselves. We only find joy when we stop demanding it. We only discover our authentic path when we stop forcing ourselves down roads that were never ours to travel. Surrender doesn't mean giving up on growth. It means giving up the war against what is. It means dropping the exhausting pretense that you should be further along, more healed, more enlightened than you are right now. What if, just for today, you allowed yourself to be exactly as you are? What if you treated your difficult emotions not as enemies to vanquish, but as messengers carrying wisdom? What if you stopped performing happiness and started practicing presence instead? Schopenhauer understood this when he wrote that happiness comes not from pursuing pleasure, but from reducing our resistance to life as it is. The pain in your life isn't punishment. It isn't failure. It's information. It's initiation. It's the universe asking you to grow not by escaping your humanity, but by diving deeper into it. True surrender isn't passive. It's the most active choice you can make, to stop abandoning yourself in pursuit of some imagined perfection and start accompanying yourself through the messy, beautiful, terrible gift of being alive. This is the freedom you've been seeking all along. Not freedom from pain, but freedom from the exhausting pretense that you should be someone other than who you are. There's a deeper joy waiting for you beyond the performance, beyond the masks, beyond the endless chase for highs that never last. Not happiness as our culture defines it, that fragile state dependent on everything going right, but wholeness, that unshakable peace that comes from no longer being at war with your own experience. This wholeness doesn't look impressive on Instagram. It doesn't sell self-help books. It doesn't promise you'll never feel pain again. It offers something far more valuable, the capacity to hold all of life, the light and the dark, the ecstasy and the sorrow, not as opposing forces, but as essential parts of the same sacred whole. I think of David, who came to me after losing everything, his business, his marriage, his health. I thought my life was over, he said. I had failed at happiness, failed at success, failed at everything that seemed to matter. For months he sat with his grief, not trying to overcome it or transform it, but simply allowing it to be. And in that allowing, something unexpected happened. He discovered parts of himself he never knew existed when he was busy performing success, depth, compassion, a quiet strength that didn't depend on external validation. I'm not always happy now, he told me, but I'm whole in a way I never was when I was chasing happiness. I can feel everything, sadness, joy, confusion, clarity, and none of it breaks me. None of it defines me. I'm the awareness that holds it all. This is the awakening we're really longing for. Not endless bliss, but unflinching presence. Not constant pleasure, but the courage to remain open to all of life, beautiful and brutal, divine and human. Wholeness comes not from rising above your humanity, but from embracing it fully, from saying yes to all of yourself. The ambitious parts and the lazy parts, the loving parts and the judgmental parts, the wounded child and the wise elder, all of it held in the same compassionate awareness. This integration isn't easy. Our culture doesn't reward it. We're trained to curate ourselves, to hide the darkness, to perform perfection. The journey back to wholeness means going against everything you've been taught about what makes a life good, worthy, successful. But each time you choose authenticity over performance, presence over escape, truth over comfort, you reclaim a piece of your soul. You become more real, more alive, more fully yourself. And from this wholeness, a different kind of joy emerges. Not the frantic, grasping happiness of endless self-improvement, but the quiet joy of being fully present to your life exactly as it is. The sacred relief of no longer needing to be special or perfect or perpetually positive. The deep peace that comes from finally coming home to yourself. This joy isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It lives in the small moments, in the courage to feel your grief without rushing to fix it, in the kindness you show yourself when you fail, in the freedom of saying what's true instead of what sounds good. In the end, the great deception wasn't that happiness is impossible. It's that happiness was never the point. The point was wholeness. The point was truth. The point was becoming fully human in a world that's forgotten what that means. So I ask you now, what parts of yourself have you been hiding? What emotions have you deemed unacceptable? What truths have you been too afraid to face? Your path to freedom isn't in rising above these questions. It's in having the courage to answer them honestly, not for anyone else, for yourself, for the wholeness that's waiting on the other side of the performance. Because when you stop chasing happiness and start embracing your whole truth, the mess, the beauty, the darkness, the light, you don't just find yourself, you become yourself, and that is the only freedom that lasts.